John Mullan came to the mountains of Washington Territory with a dream of building roads to open the frontier to Americans heading west.
Move forward!
But instead, he's found himself on the front lines of a war against the combined tribes of the Columbia Valley.
Cover! Cover!
The young lieutenant commands a group of Nez Perce scouts on a high-risk mission to clear a ridgeline of enemy warriors.
Return fire! Stay down!
Mullen is an untested battle leader.
Stay in cover!
And as he tries to get his scouts to fight as a unit, the very fate of the northwestern frontier rests in his hands. John Mullan isn't a household name, but he plays a crucial role in fulfilling America's destiny.
Mullen's a soldier, he's an engineer, but his real spirit is of an adventurer. That's what makes him so successful in the West.
When he arrives out west, he has the opportunity to do something important. In a way, he sees himself as completing the unfinished business of Lewis and Clark.
Mullen is really smart, and he's also really ambitious. In the tradition of Lewis and Clark, of Fremont, he's a great explorer. He sees himself as the road builder that's going to open up the fabulous West to the rest of the country.
Before Mullen can make a name for himself as a road builder, his courage and fortitude will both undergo an extreme test on the frontier. After graduating from West Point, newly commissioned Second Lieutenant John Mullan heads west for the first time.
John Mullan immerses himself in the journals of Lewis and Clark. He becomes fascinated with the American West, and he wants to take part in that dream.
Despite being technically an artillery officer, he came out west to build a reputation, and the way he was going to do it was to be part of something much bigger.
Governor Stevens. Lieutenant John Mullan, sir, reporting for duty. My orders.
At Fort Union in modern-day North Dakota, Mullan reports to Isaac Stevens, one of the most important men in the Northwest.
In 1853, President Franklin Pierce appointed Isaac Stevens to be the first territorial governor of the newly created Washington Territory.
But Stevens isn't just a politician. He's also a leader in the most ambitious expedition since Lewis and Clark.
The discovery of gold in California changed everything in the American West, and it became essential now to build railroads. And so almost immediately, plans were put into motion for 5 railroad surveys to find the best possible route. Isaac Stevens was placed in charge of the Northern Survey.
Oh, Lieutenant Mullan. Artilleryman, I see. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of cannons out here. But your training in topography will come in handy. We need officers that have more than map-making skills. We need men of vision.
Sir, settlers will be seeking new lands. They need men like us to build a route, to show them the way. Daniel Boone did it. So did Lewis and Clark. Now it's our turn.
Well, let's see if you last a week out here before you go out doing Lewis and Clark. Sergeant, we'll see about your billet.
Sir.
Mullen's whole experience with the frontier has really been in the fantasy of his mind, reading stories from Lewis and Clark from 50 years earlier. It's not until he gets to Fort Union that he realizes that the West is a very real place, and he's about to see how real it can get.
A former member of the Army Corps of Engineers, Stevens assigns Mullen to a series of important surveys he oversees in what is now Montana. The coming months will offer Mullen a crash course in the splendor and hardships of the frontier. Stevens' expedition sets out from Fort Union on a nearly 400-mile trek to Fort Benton in modern-day Montana.
Mullen has always had a keen eye for the landscape. He's always been interested in nature and studied the land, but now it's his job. And when he sees the Rocky Mountains for the first time, it's almost a religious experience for him.
Incredible.
Awe-inspiring. I'd say so.
I mean, I read about the Rocky Mountains, but no words can describe what it is to actually see them.
I'm not sure I can do them justice.
Meticulous work. I imagine even more so once you have the time.
Gustavus Sohn was a U.S. Army artist. Sohone's task was to provide a visual record of the surveying activities of the expedition. Sohone's images are quite beautiful and help to establish in the minds of the masses just what splendors might await settlers were they to venture west.
Shall we ride on, sir?
You go. I got some more notes I want to take.
As Sohan makes his sketches, Mullen takes meticulous topographical notes of the landscape and soon manages to impress his new mentor, Isaac Stevens.
Lieutenant, I'm impressed with the level of detail I'm seeing in your reports.
Stevens is almost immediately gratified to learn that he absolutely made the right choice. Mullen is certainly the man for the job, so that affords Mullen a degree of independence, unusual for a man at this stage of his career.
Good work.
Mullen's early months in the West are something of a dream come true. But for Mullen, the dream is about to become a nightmare. Impressed with Mullen's work, Governor Stevens tasks the young lieutenant with his first independent command.
John Mullan will lead an expedition from Cantonment Stevens, near present-day Stevensville, Montana, to Fort Hall in Idaho. Mullen's task is far more than just finding an easy railway route through this treacherous region. He also has to find a wagon route that will run alongside where the rail will be, because you can't build a railroad unless you can supply the workers and bring in materials.
Specimens for our friends at the Smithsonian. They'll want mineral samples from this territory, and the more information we have on the geology, better suited we'll be to build a wagon road.
This land was really not very well understood, as would have a topographer creating maps and taking scientific information. It was significant not only for the future railroad, but just for science in general.
But because the expedition starts late in the year, cold weather begins to affect Mullen's progress. Enthusiasm soon gives way to desperation as his men begin to struggle against both the cold and limited supplies.
It's not an ideal time of year to begin a sort of prolonged exploration through the mountains. And yet they don't really have any other choice. Isaac Stevens needs to make sure that he can present to the Congress of the United States a plan for building a railroad.
Under the conditions, tensions begin to boil over.
Gabriel, help me with this measurement.
Lieutenant, we have to keep moving.
Gabriel Prudhomme was half Cree, half French-Canadian. He had experience as a guide and as interpreter for a number of Catholic emissaries across the American West. So he ends up providing him valuable information about the landscape, information that wasn't necessarily forthcoming from Native American guides.
We have a mission. Gabriel, Wagons might be able to make it up this grade, but they will have to do so without added weight.
Sir, it will be dark soon.
I have a duty, Proudhome, to survey these mountains. Now, if I do not record the gradient of this measurement, how will I recommend an effective wagon route?
The men? You have a duty to them, too.
This is one of the first moments in his life where he has a reality check, when he recognizes that he doesn't have to solely look out for himself. He's responsible for the livelihoods of a large company of men.
Men, I know that you are tired and hungry. Let the promise of a good meal at Fort Hall keep you warm. This is my last measurement. Then we can make camp.
Mullen has to balance the well-being of his men with the demands of his job and his own innate curiosity.
This becomes a real test for Mullen. He's so fixated on living up to the standard that he promised Governor Stevens. His fixation, his drive, it's certainly one of his greatest strengths, but it's also one of his greatest weaknesses.
Despite the value of Mullen's scientific findings, he can't ignore the cold temperatures and the hunger of his men for long.
Gabriel, look. Salvation.
Maybe they have meat to share.
Let's approach cautiously. So, do we have any tobacco to trade with?
Mullen and his men are cold, tired, and hungry. And just when things seem to be at their lowest, they see a lodge in the distance. It offers the promise of warmth, of food, respite from the cold. It's like seeing an oasis in the desert.
Strange, out here all alone?
What Mullen thought might be a lifeline turns into an immediate threat. Young Lieutenant John Mullen's expedition is cold and starving.
Look, Salvation.
But when they stumble across a Bannock lodge, Mullen finds that they're not welcome.
Keep your heads down. Du niveau là, aucune mal!
Prudhomme is the logical choice to try to parley with this Bannock woman. He won't be perceived as a foreigner in the way that someone like Mullen or Sohorn will.
Nous avons du table à échanger.
Many of the tribes that Mullen dealt with had been ministered to by Jesuits, and so they were used to speaking French because that was the language of the Jesuit priest who they were working with.
She says no trade.
But as Prudhomme discovers, Mullen and his men aren't the only ones suffering.
This woman was home by herself. Her family was out hunting, and she was really just trying to protect what was hers.
In order to survive, Mullen and his men will need to find food and shelter, and fast.
What keeps Mullen going is his mission from Governor Stevens. This cannot be his last expedition. He's got something to prove. No matter bad weather or being low on provisions, he's got to make it to Fort Hall.
As night falls on another miserable day,
So on.
Mullen and his men come to a small outpost.
This can't be Fort Hall.
Whatever it isn't on the map. We have no food. Maybe they can give us shelter. Otherwise, we won't make it to Fort Hall. Tell the men we're moving on.
After the encounter with the Bannock woman, Mullen isn't taking any chances, no matter how hungry he is.
Mullen was in desperate need of a break, and he'll get one when they find Richard Grant.
Richard Grant had retired from the Hudson's Bay Company at Fort Hall and moved to a place called the Cantonment Loring. Grant had a reputation as being quite a jovial and friendly guy who welcomed company.
Captain Richard Grant, at your service.
Lieutenant John Mullan.
Please come in. I've got more than enough food and warmth for you and all your men.
Thank you, sir. Your generosity couldn't come at a better time.
Grant's hospitality saves Mullen's expedition. Despite the difficult ordeal, Mullen completes his mission and makes his report to Isaac Stevens.
It was a tough assignment, Mullen.
There were times I thought I'd come close to failure. We nearly starved, honestly. I thought I'd almost let everyone down.
Look, you identified 2 routes through the mountain, and you kept your men alive. That's no small feat.
Thank you, sir.
John, you've proven yourself to be a dedicated soldier and surveyor. But that's the kind of man that's going to help build this nation.
I'll do my best to honor your trust. I am determined to find wagon and railway routes from Fort Benton across the Continental Divide.
And with that kind of determination, I believe you're right. Now go get some rest.
Mullen was extremely successful in those explorations that he took in 1853-54, and they were some of the most significant explorations of the American West that were ever undertaken. The report itself really confirmed Stevens' belief that he had picked the right guy to undertake these important explorations.
But if Mullen's first assignment was difficult, his next project will be more than he ever bargained for.
Stevens now believes that it is Mullen who has the ability, the drive to lead the construction of a military road that will go from Fort Benton all the way to Fort Walla Walla.
This is more than just building a road. This is really Mullen's chance to become one of the great engineers in America's great migration west.
We got a long ride ahead of us. Lots of ground to cover.
But this time we don't have the cold to worry about.
Sure, there'll be plenty of other trials. When we finish, immigrants from Missouri will be able to cross through these mountains and make it all the way to the Pacific. Finally get to build our road. Good to see you again, old friend. Let's make history together.
Mullen and his expedition set out from Fort Dalles to Fort Walla Walla. There, they will employ men for the road project and officially break ground. But they haven't traveled far when startling news arrives from their destination.
Lieutenant Mullen, sir. Dispatches from Colonel Rice, sir.
Lieutenant, what is it?
An attack on the Army. We're at war.
The U.S. Army has recently suffered a debilitating defeat at the hands of the Columbia Valley tribes. And if Mullen continues his expedition, he and his men will surely meet the same fate. Lieutenant John Mullan has barely begun his road-building expedition when he's halted by news of a bloody battle.
An attack on the Army. We're at war.
The courier brings Mullen a warning about a state of increased antagonism between the American government and various native tribes who believe that certain lands are theirs by treaty, but are going to realize very soon that a new Army road is going to go right through those territories.
We have no choice but to return to Fort Dalles.
And the road project?
It'll have to wait.
The territory that was once peaceful is now brimming with tension and hostility.
Men, prepare to leave in 20 minutes.
You heard the lieutenant. Mount up.
The establishment of the military road was first expressed as being a benefit to the tribal nations, but ultimately our leadership understood that it was going to bring more of that transformation of our landscape and transformation of our way of life.
A war is brewing, and Mullen has no choice but to put his project on hold and return to Fort Dalles. But Mullen will soon get a new assignment from the man charged with restoring peace in the Columbia Valley.
Colonel George Wright is the commander of the 9th Infantry Regiment. It's his job to essentially assemble the military force and lead it on an expedition to put down this uprising among the Columbia River tribes.
This is the route we'll take to the Spokane Plains. Tribes will probably be waiting for us there. Yakima, Monterey, hundreds of warriors.
Not familiar with the region, sir. But if I can scout ahead with the Dragoons, I can identify the best military routes.
Well, we'll be depending on you and your scouts. Take detailed notes as far as the best routes across the creeks and terrain. Might even be useful for your road one day. Remember this, Mullen. This is a military campaign, not a construction project. Understood?
Mullen's going to serve as a topographical engineer for the expedition. This means he's going to create maps, and he's going to scout ahead and help the Army find its route as it makes its march to its eventual confrontation with the warriors.
As part of Mullen's assignment, he is given command of a platoon of Nez Perce scouts.
The scouts would often go out and reconnaissance the whole area to see if there were enemies about.
Mullen and his scouts set out for an area known as 4 Lakes, where the enemy warriors are believed to be gathered.
John Mullan has been an Army officer for several years, but he's never actually been in a fight in his life. And now he's been put in command of a group of warriors. And there's probably a sense that he needs to prove himself to these scouts that he's in command of.
Near the Snake River, they spot Yakima warriors. And Mullen orders the scouts to take them captive.
Don't move!
Weapons down, weapons down. Easy, easy, easy. You too. Easy.
It's very out of character to see Mullen pursuing this warrior into this river. He's not the impulsive type. He's always cool and calculated and collected. But he's now at the helm of 30 Nez Perce scouts, and he wants to prove to them that he's not going to order them to do anything that he wouldn't do himself.
Don't move!
Mullen suddenly finds himself in the fight of his life, and he has no way to defend himself.
Don't move!
On the march to war, Lieutenant John Mullan is in a life-or-death struggle with a Yakima warrior, and he could become a casualty before even reaching the battlefield. The fight is a draw. But it's a victory for Mullen's reputation to the Nez Perce scouts under his command.
Even though the warrior escapes, Mullen is seen sort of as a pretty tough hombre to these warriors and comes away with a little bit more respect in the eyes of his scouts.
That was the first time I thought living on the frontier might actually kill me.
I don't know what you were thinking, Lieutenant. But you sure made an impression.
But the scouts aren't the only ones who see something new in John Mullan.
What's going on here? What was that shooting?
A prisoner, sir. He escaped.
It's Mullen, right? Let's get that wound looked at, Lieutenant. Let's go, Private.
Have a seat, Lieutenant.
One of the officers who's central to Colonel Wright's plan is Brevet Major William Greer. He's a seasoned officer in the 1st Dragoon Regiment, and he also has the distinction of having quite a bit of experience on the frontier.
It's all right. You're lucky he didn't brain you.
They just stood there and watched. But then they cheered. Major Greer.
They didn't know you. Warriors need to know what kind of man is leading them into a fight. Now they do. Proved yourself worthy, at least for today.
Amongst the Nez Perce people, the leaders of warriors had to be proven in not only their leadership, but also in their ability. Observing John Mullan in hand-to-hand combat with the enemy warrior had proven to many of the Nez Perce that were present that he was a man of a certain ability in the field of battle.
There was nothing like this in Lewis and Clark's journals.
No. They had their struggles. The greatest was leadership. To do what they did, chart the unknown. Lewis and Clark had to find something within themselves. So will you. They're brave men, these scouts. What they look for in a leader isn't taught at West Point, and it's not the rank you wear. It's on the inside. You find that, Mullen, and these men follow you into whatever it is that's coming.
Mullen walks away from his near-death encounter with more respect from the men under his command, but nothing can prepare him for the fight still ahead. Within days of Mullen's fight in the river, the Army closes in on an area known as the Spokane Plains.
Colonel Wright is really waiting on the Columbia tribes to make the first move, and Wright tells his men to be ready for anything. Now, John Mullan understands that when the time comes, he may be the one responsible for initiating the fighting.
But the time for battle comes even sooner than Mullen anticipates.
Lieutenant.
When the soldiers wake up that morning and they see hundreds of warriors on the high ground, it's a pretty intimidating sight. They're essentially taunting the army. They're inviting them to bring on a battle.
Either we found them or they found us.
Lieutenant John Mullan came to the Northwest to build an important road through the Rocky Mountains. Now, he finds himself facing what could be an epic battle for the destiny of the region.
This would have been a very amazing spectacle to behold, as much of the intent was to confuse and to intimidate the enemy that beheld you at that point.
The Columbia Valley tribes have given Colonel George Wright the clear signal. It's time to fight.
Lieutenant, move your company up.
Yes, sir.
All around these ridges are massive numbers of warriors who are basically like, well, bring it on, let's fight.
Sir, you sent for me, sir.
Mullen, what's over that ridge?
Scouts say a grassy field, sir.
Have the infantry push against the center of the ridge. Have Greer and the dragoons go on the left. Head for the field. Take your scouts and move up on the right. Hit their flank. You need to push them off the ridge and into the field. We'll encircle them.
Wright is going to launch a three-pronged assault against the warriors on the high ground. He's going to send John Mullan and his scouts to the right flank. The infantry under Wright's command is going to move up into the center. And over on the left, Major Greer and his dragoons are going to sort of do a flanking maneuver. And the idea is that all three of these parts of Wright's forces are going to close in on the warriors, push them off the hills, and trap them in the plains behind the high ground.
It's very important that you hit their flank and hold your position, Mullen. If you don't, they can sweep around us, capture our supplies, take our camp, kill our teamsters. You have your orders. Move!
It's very important for John Mullan to succeed in his mission of leading these scouts into battle. It's the only way he's ever going to build his road, and it's the only way he's ever going to secure his own destiny, and it's the only way he's ever going to play a role in the civilization of the Western frontier.
Well, my friend, it seems this may be my crowded hour of glory. In case I don't make it back. The latest reports from Governor Stevens. It may very well be you that finishes our work.
John Mullan graduated from West Point. He was highly trained, but this is really his first battle. There's really nothing that can prepare him for what's ahead. So there's a lot at stake in this engagement. His road is certainly at stake, but even more than that, his reputation.
Lewis and Clark, they dreamed of a path through these mountains. I believe one day that we can make that a reality.
Move forward!
With his own future and that of the frontier on the line, Mullen enters battle for the first time, leading his scouts up the right side of a ridge. To his left, regular Army soldiers also fight their way up the slope.
Cover! Cover! Charge!
But the inexperienced leader soon loses control of his command.
Cover! Down, men! Return fire! Stay in cover! Stay down!
As Mullen is moving up, his attack starts to unravel. His warriors kind of want to go off and do their own thing.
Unlike the trained military soldier and officers who were directly commanded to do certain things upon the field of battle, Nez Perce warriors would follow their own intuition of how they were engaged into that specific action.
In combat situations, you find yourself under incredible duress. Your body will prepare for that. Your heart rate will spike, your blood pressure goes up, your emotions intensify. Some people really power up in a situation that's fight or flight like this, but other people shut down. It's really sensory overload.
Tongue! Stay down! Stay down. Hold! Hold, men! Reload! On me, men!
In this baptism by fire, Mullen's leadership is put to the ultimate test.
Regroup, move forward! Stay low!
Mullen's got to keep them all together, because if he doesn't keep them all together, his attack is going to collapse, and the whole battle may fall apart at that point.
Men, prepare to fire on my orders! Fire! Men, advance! Forward!
As bullets whiz and whip through the air and hit trees and hit other people, Mullen is finally able to sort of get control of his scouts. They realize that they've got to keep moving forward to take the high ground and push the enemy warriors back.
Halt! Skirmish line on me! Tend to those wounds, dress him! Men, reload!
But Mullen may have taken control too late. And if he doesn't clear the ridge soon, the battle will be lost.
Forward!
Lieutenant John Mullan and his Nez Perce scouts have to help the army take control of a ridge from determined Yakima warriors.
Skirmish line on me!
Or he could lose his first battle and any hope of building his road.
Men, reload! Prepare to fire on my orders! Return fire! On our left! Move, move, move! You two, reload! Go, go, go! Left flank! Fire! Full company, reload!
Mullen is able to get to the top of the hill, where they engage in some pretty intense rifle fire against the enemy warriors.
Form up, men! Form up! And fire! Charge! Come on! Come on!
With his entire future at stake, Mullen pulls off the impossible.
Mullen wasn't entirely sure that this was a battle he could win, but because of his efforts and the efforts of his scouts, it allowed Colonel Wright to press forward with his dragoons and ultimately win the Battle of Four Lakes. But after this grand victory, the first thing Mullen does is make topographical notes, planning for his proposed road coming in the future.
Well done, Mullen. We've got them routed.
Thank you, sir. But it was all their doing.
Well, I'd say they know a fine leader when they see one, Lieutenant.
This battle plays a central role in crushing this uprising by the Columbia River tribes. It also plays an important role in John Mullan's efforts to get that road project started again and kind of resume this effort. It's going to be all about helping to bring people, settlers, and civilization to the Pacific Northwest.
A year after the Battle of 4 Lakes, John Mullan finally fulfills his dream of building his road.
Mullan begins construction at Fort Walla Walla in 1859, and by 1860, in just an absolutely amazing engineering feat, he's completed his road to Fort Benton, over 600 miles.
The road and the millions of people it brings to the Pacific Northwest will be John Mullan's ultimate legacy.
John Mullan, he never started something he didn't finish. And it's pretty hard to understand the history of Montana, Idaho, and Washington without understanding the legacy of that highway that John Mullan left behind.
John Mullan is part of a generation that really cements America's western expansion in its fullest form. We see the Pacific Northwest brought into the fold of American life in a way that really changed the region forever.
John Mullan sees himself as an empire builder, and he's correct. His road is going to be the great entree point for the immigrants coming west. Not only will it eventually become the route of the Northern Transcontinental Railroad, it'll eventually become a freeway in the 1950s. So this is the beginning of the end of the frontier west, and he plays the critical role in that great enterprise.